Greetings, welcome back to Pink Oddbird. We're just going to dive right in because I thought I was recording and I wasn't. So I found this really cute clutch at the Goodwill and I decided that I wanted to save it to make a journal. So what I'm showing you here is I'm starting out by just opening the clutch up and cutting the two gussets out from either side of this. And then the inside basket is kind of exposed now, and you can see there's two layers here. So I'm just going to hang on to those two layers and then just cut up the side. And it looks like they've used a lightweight chipboard for this inside basket of the purse. I'm just going to flip this around and give myself about an inch from where the flap crease is, because I want to go back and glue that down to make sure that it stays adhered to the book, because it's how it's going to close. So I'm going to set this little piece aside because I do want to use it later on. Looking at the front side here, there is a little bit of styrofoam, and I don't want to mess with any of that because I don't want anything from the front cover coming undone. But if there are excess pieces, definitely go ahead and get those little bits cut off. Now, I know that this is really kind of prepped at a base level, but I need two of these and I was only able to find one. So I'm taking down my measurements, which are about 9 3/4 by 5, and then the flap on this is 3 inches. So I've just set aside the innards of that clutch because we're going to use it later. For now, I'm taking 2 pieces of paper, the cover of a paper pad and a file folder, and I'm going to adhere these together to give myself a base that is comparable to the clutch that we just took apart. And by all means, if you have one piece of paper that is strong enough to make this base, by all means, you can do it that way. I just didn't have one that I felt was structurally sound enough for the base that I need for my book. I hope you're finding this process helpful if you don't have access to a clutch like the one that I have found. It's a really neat way to make yourself a nice looking clutch journal. This flap here, I didn't end up needing it, but I had originally had something else in mind and I wanted to save it. Ultimately, I probably could have cut it off, but I ended up leaving it there just for more structure to the cover. Now I'm measuring my cover down to 5 inches, so it's going to be 5 inches on the front cover here, and the excess piece, that is going to be what the hinge is where we attach the flap. So reaching back over for the innards of the clutch that we previously took apart, I'm just going to cut a good amount of this off, and I'm going to use this for what will be the flap. And I'm making sure that I have more than 3 inches here, enough to glue down to attach to the hinge, and then enough to go back and cut down to make it a straight edge. And I'm going to cut that silk off there because I don't really feel that it's necessary. I know that everyone's clutch, if you're taking one apart, won't be the same, but I hope this gives you a kind of a good idea of how you can prepare your own journal cover out of a clutch and also build one of your own if you don't have access to one. So I'm measuring everything down here and I'm just getting rid of all this excess stuff and things. And I'm ready to adhere this down to the hinge that we've left on the remainder of the cover. What I'm doing here is marking this down to 3 inches. I feel like that is more than substantial for a closure on this type of journal, and it matches the original clutch that we've taken apart. Once I get this glued down, you'll notice there's a little bit of file folder sticking out on either side because the closure tapers inward. And so if yours is like mine, then you just want to take your scissors and make the cover flush with the closure. So just taper it all down together. And then the final thing would be to make your cover flap closure straight. So I'm just going to take it to my trimmer and make sure that that part is straight. The next thing that you'll want to note after that is if you want rounded corners, you can use your corner punch to make the the corners rounded. The corner punch didn't really work as great as I thought it should have. It didn't give that really dramatic rounded edge like you see on the original clutch. So if you want a really rounded, dramatic edge, do it by hand. Just draw yourself some rounded corners and cut those down. I took my cover over to my machine and stitched around the perimeter, and as you can see here, what we have is almost an exact replica of the original clutch that we took apart. So if you don't have access to a clutch, you can easily build one. I've just went off camera and added the fabric to the outside of my clutch, the one that I built, and I want to focus now a little bit more on getting the insides done. So I had a few scraps that I had just kind of laying around and I decided that I would use those for my inside cover. If you have one piece of fabric, you can totally use that. You don't have to use fabric. You can also use paper. And in retrospect, this is one good thing about doing a voiceover. I have hindsight. What I probably would have done is I think I would have had my signature ready first because of the kind of cover it is on the outside. It's completely beaded and I didn't want to stitch through that. So I would have done a hidden binding on this and then added paper or fabric to the sides to hide that hidden binding. But since this is the way that I went, this is the way that it's going to be shown. So the first thing I'm doing here before I glue down my fabric for the inside cover is just gluing down the flap, and I'm just going to hang on to that satin there because I want it to look finished when it's tucked under the fabric that I layer over it. And to make life a little bit easier, since I'm using scraps, I'm going to take these over to my machine and stitch them together to essentially make one piece of fabric. And there it is. So now that I have my piece of fabric ready to go, I'm going to start gluing it into the book and cutting off excess where needed. Again, what I'm showing you here is just the structure of how you can get these books made. The signature, the closure mechanism, and the binding type I will leave open for your creativity to flow. Once you have your fabric adhered, you can do what I'm planning to do, and that's adding some trim to the edges just to make it look really nice and finished and cover up any glue that may have been excess, kind of like I have here, and you just want to set it aside to let it dry. Now popping back over to the cover that I built, it is not fully beaded on the front cover or the outside cover, so I'm okay with stitching through this one. So for this book, I have cut one continuous piece of fabric, and you can see I'm just going to completely layer that into the inside cover of this book. That's going to wrap it up for this video of showing you these two processes, breaking down a clutch to make a cover and building your own. I hope you will give one or both of these processes a try. If you do, be sure to let me know, and I'll be back in a couple of days with a flip through of both of these journals. So that's going to wrap it up for me for now. be sure to stay tuned because you never know what direction this odd flock of ours is heading into. And until next time, toodaloo.